Welcome everyone to this session on prioritizing your 2024 to-do list to maximize your security posture. I'm John Gunn, the CEO of Token, and I'm very honored to have a distinguished guest with me today, the Wolfgang Gerlich, who is the advisory CISO at Cisco. Wolfgang, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, absolutely. First off, I love this topic because every time I've had a to-do list, including my current one, it has just been pages and pages and pages and pages, right? Any way we can form a prioritization matrix or drive some of those things to the top, I'm all about. So thanks so much for having me. For those of you who don't know me, I've got a background leading IT and IT security and financial services and in healthcare at a money management firm and hospital, respectively. Coming out of that, did many years in consulting, was SVP of a firm where I led IAM, GRC, data protection, and advisory. And today with Cisco, I am a advisory CISO.
Fantastic. As I said at the start, I'm John Gunn. I'm the CEO of Token. We are a startup that makes next generation MFA that stops phishing and hacking. I've been in the cybersecurity space for about 20 years. It's been astounding the changes in these 20 years, and most of it in the IM space, which is really where all the action takes place in this battle against criminals and hackers and enemy nation states. And Wolfgang, it has been an incredible year. I mean, you look back at it, this is challenges that our audience members face, that all of us face. The evolution just seems to be accelerating. There's been so much drama. The losses are going up, that the exposure goes up, the resources aren't going up. Just I'd love to hear your thoughts on when you look back at 2023, what really stands out in your mind as this is what 2023 remembered as?
For one, I think the time, right? The timing has changed. And so we've really had to shift towards resilience. Now, many organizations aren't even on this path yet, but you mentioned 20 years ago, right? Even 10 years ago, I could say, you know what? As long as I catch it within a few days, I've got a good chance at stopping the adversary. I've got a good chance at getting up. The breach reports say 200 days. If I can get them out in 5 or 10, I'm doing fine. And now, of course, we see these attacks that compromise an inbox, start doing fraud, move to ransomware, or move to account receivable fraud in a matter of minutes. So we really had to step away from this idea that there's some time to detect, and there's some time to prevent, and there's some time to investigate, and to building a resilient set of controls that automatically respond. So resiliency, in my mind, was the word of 2023. Innovation in the space calls to that. Now, I'm sure AI is going to come into this conversation because it comes up in every conversation. But a lot of the technologies, they jump forward, right? And so just an amazing amount of new tactics that we've had to deal with, new vectors we had to deal with. And on top of that, of course, we've got this sort of like evolution that's going on in terms of what it means to be a CISO, what it means to do cybersecurity. You mentioned identity. Just to give one example, one of the things that I do a lot of is security reports. I want to know the data. I read a lot of reports. I help write a few reports. I'm a big believer that, with apologies to Dunning, without data, you're just a CISO with an opinion, right? Give me the data. And so this year, one of the studies we did, the security outcome study, we talked to 5,000 folks, and we asked them, how are you doing on zero trust? And the previous year, people were like, oh yeah, 80% were like, we're done. We're there. We've got it. And this time it dropped to 2%. Only 2% of folks had maturity crossed a number of pillars. And so people were like, what happened? Were they wrong last year? No. As things have changed, we've actually evolved our definition of what success means. The more we know, the less we feel we know, right? And it's this really interesting time where, because of resilience, because of changes in technology, a lot of our underlying assumptions have just gone out the window when it comes to security.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that resiliency is and speed of response, are the key points. Another one is phishing. When you look at where companies are getting hit, you look at the major breaches. They used to be in the low millions. Now they're in the Now they're in the triple digit, MGM 100 million, and you look at Johnson Controls and Caesars and the list, and there's so many that aren't reported, and they're all getting hit. And I shouldn't say they all, but 90% are because of phishing. So to me, it's that resiliency is necessary because so many attackers, enemy states, cyber criminals, hackers are getting in. Help Desk Security had a title story, a headline month or so ago that said, hackers aren't breaking in, they're logging in. And it's because we're using 20-year-old technology, to secure that. So that stands out to me for sure. And absolutely, that the CISO's role is changing. And when you look at the tenure, I mean, what's the average tenure for a CISO? It's less than 2 years. I mean, how do you make and implement a long-term strategy if you're only there for a year and a half? Do you think that's a challenge?
Well, it certainly is. And, some of my favorite CISOs have been in their roles, 4, 6, 8. I love the folks who buck that trend. But there is a lot of pressure. If you're a new CISO and you come in and everything's on fire, do you want to stay? If you're a new CISO and you come in and your board and executive team have already underfunded the project and your mandate is just make it a little bit better, do you want to stay? Especially when we're starting to see CISOs potentially on the hook for lawsuits, right? I understand the impetus to move out, but again, there's a lot of folks who buck that trend, who get in, build early relationships, figure out where the cultural pushback is, and are able to build a strategy. So there's this really weird world that's emerging of sort of like haves and have-nots when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, everybody talks about that. I think another factor too is there's such a shortage. Simple economics. I'm a student of economics. If there's so many job openings, things are getting rough where I am. I know I've got 5 people who hired me tomorrow. The stickiness is a little less than if there's no other jobs out there. So I'm not, audience, I'm not insulting you. I'm not saying you're quitters. I'm just saying I think that's a contributing factor too as well to that short tenure.
You mentioned phishing. I think phishing is really indicative of the world we live in, because we're coming up on 30 years of phishing. So for those of you who got a little gray hair, you may remember that like original phishing started, and this really dates me, in the AOL days. And we said at the time, you know what, if AOL would just patch their stuff, we would stop phishing. And then it moved into email. And we thought, you know what, if we would just block executables on emails, we would stop phishing. And then it's moved to credentials. And then the line was, if everyone just ran multi-factor, we would stop phishing. And every single time we've had a response to this, the adversaries have gotten a little bit better. One of the things I like to think about is, we all talk about building a better mousetrap, but what security has shown us over 30 decades, oh my goodness, over 3 decades, is all a better mousetrap does is breed better mice.
Yeah.
And that's one of the joys of this field, but it's also one of the tears of this field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to get to generative AI in a minute, because that is, that is one of the top things on everybody's mind, just AI and also generative AI. Just separate the two. Before we get there, what else should be on people's to-do list besides embracing AI and getting ready to defend against it? Beyond that, what else should be important?
I like that you separate generative AI from AI. If you think about it, like I think about like Rosies and Roombas. Like if you remember, like the sci-fi maid robot who pushes around the vacuum, who cooks the meal, who cracks jokes with you, right?
Okay.
Who walks the dog, but whose primary purpose is to vacuum. You're like, all right, that's probably a $500,000 unit, and it's probably spent a lot of time in research and development and everything else. Why don't we have those? Where's my flying car and where's my Rosie? Well, we don't have a Rosie because we have a Roomba, which is $200. You plug it in, it doesn't tell you jokes, it won't walk your dog, but it keeps the floor clean and is significantly less expensive. In the same way, as we move forward into generative AI, we need to keep a really strong eye on the areas where ML has been working and working well. So think about it in terms of good machine learning on identity, right? For how many years was it, oh, I've got a username and password, maybe I've got a good multi-factor, and that's all I need to authenticate. But today, across a variety of different spaces, when we think about identity as the perimeter, we're also using MLD to spot fraud, our risky users. we're using good context clues to determine whether or not we should let people in. We're seeing similar moves, and organizations should also take similar moves, not only to secure the identity, which is where it all starts, but also application and data controls. Right, once you're in, now what apps can you get to? What data can you exfiltrate? I had a call and a great conversation with a security team just this week where they're like, hey, we've got multi-tier this, segmented that, strong authentication this, that, and here's our problem. We got 750 folks who run reports ad hoc from our database and dump it to a flat file. Well, that is a problem because we got a great fortress that we've now moved all that value out. So, I think DLP, which has long been sort of like, I don't want to mess with that, is going to have a comeback, just like IAM is having a comeback right now. And all that really sets the stage for some of the innovation resilience we talked about. G2 Patel, who's Executive Vice President and General Manager here at Cisco of our security and collaboration business, he has a line that I love. He says, to be an AI first company, you must first be a data first company. And so if you think about that through line from who gets access to the data, how are we storing and maintaining the data? What does our application layer looks like? What are we doing for data controls? We've got a whole slew of priorities where we can inject controls that exist today to really position us well for forward momentum.
Yeah, that's a nice segue to our next topic about, the application, of AI on the defense side. And what I want to do, Wolfgang, is split, AI into two sections here. One on the, how we use it to defend, and number two, how we anticipate, criminal hackers, cyber gangs, enemy states, how they'll use it. There's so many people promoting AI. I remember Bojan Smith, the CEO of Hyper, he posted a funny meme after RSA with about making fun of the fact that every vendor claimed they had AI. It became the marketing buzzword. But you look back a few years, like it was EY or Deloitte, analyzed the success rate of most organizations' AI projects. It was less than 50%. So I think when you look at the application of it, is that how can organizations make the right decisions? Before it was you had to have AI. Well, now everybody has it. But what are your thoughts on how organizations should implement AI? What I do is simple. I just keep bad people out. If you can't prove who you are, you don't get it. You don't need the AI for that. AI it can benefit, but it's really about stopping people from getting in. But there's so many other areas. What are your thoughts on where AI will benefit, and where should our audience focus? Where how can they get the most out of the advances in AI in their defense strategy?
Well, first step is, look for your Roombas, look for your features. We've got good ML, and that you haven't turned it on yet because you haven't had an initiative or a project or whatever, and get that enabled. There's every time we look at a security control. When I was doing consulting, this was endemic. Every time I met with an organization, they would use like 10% of the tools that they bought. And so we know across the board, we've got a lot of machine learning, detect and respond capabilities are not being deployed today. So turn those things on, have an initiative to clean it up. Now, when we start thinking about generative AI, right? You'll love this, John. I had a weekend a couple months ago where the family was out, they're doing their own thing. I got to be home alone. I'm like, man of my house, man of my castle. What am I going to do? I did a capture the flag. So it was an immersive environment. They gave you up to 12 hours. They had infected Windows servers and Linux servers. They had domain control those messed up. They had data that was being exfiltrated. They said, go forward and do. Now, I don't know about you, but it's been a long time since I was in the SOC. So I popped open GPT, and I popped open some of our early, technologies that have been evolving. And I just sat there and said, like, remind me again how to look at a process list. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll go do this. All right, remind me again what our normal processes. Oh, yeah, I'll go do this. How are passwords hashed again? Oh, yeah, I'll go do this. And so it took me about 6-7 hours, but I solved all the challenges.
Yeah.
And that's when it really occurred to me. One, there's a lot of different ways we can take generative AI, but one of the ways that's going to be deployed today immediately is as a faster, quicker Google and a spicier autocomplete, right? Your teams, your SOC teams, your identity teams, your policy teams are spending a ton of time searching for things, interpreting things. If they just go to the tools and interact with them that way, they can get much faster. And I've talked to many SOCs already doing this with like regex queries and SIM queries. And so we're going to see a renaissance of better, faster technology, getting the knowledge into the heads of the people who make the decisions.
Yeah.
And really, instead of viewing this as a replacement, view this as an enhancement for your existing team and its knowledge base.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you touched on it earlier. One of the real benefits is it is the speed of identifying when a bad actor is inside a network. And a year or two ago, you'd read, oh, somebody's disclosing in October that they had a breach, and they identified, after doing forensics, they identified that the attackers have been there since March. So it was measured in months, and weeks. And I think that if you listen to all the vendors, there's a lot of truth to it. With AI, good old fashioned AI, they'll bring that down to, the goal, the holy grail is real time. If somebody did defeat, and a lot of people are defeating legacy and Fey, once they're in, as you said, can I find out now and take action to protect myself? Or am I finding out, okay, this is why the building burned down, it was a bad heater, but the building's still in ashes. So how do you stop that? So I think that'll be one of the biggest applications of AI outside of generative AI.
I think you're right. I am a big fan of the generative AI side. Cisco announced our AI assistant for security recently, and I'm really itching. I'm waiting for the next weekend where I can sit down and do another CTF and play with this. But your point is well taken. I mentioned earlier around applications, right? I know one instance where an organization, I'm sure there's more instances than this, but where an organization deployed good controls around their application. So if $1 was requested, $1 was sent back. If a string was expected, the string didn't have any weird characters, right? If this type of microservices normally talk to that, those are the connections. So that was the structure they built. And if it wasn't working from a resilience perspective, from an SRE or site reliability perspective, they would reload it. They'd go, oh, something must be wrong, run an Ansible script, scrub it all out. So what happens? Someone makes a mistake. Someone exposes the Kubernetes controller to the internet. Someone finds a vulnerability in Kubernetes. These factors come together. And now there's people out there who are scanning for and breaking into Kubernetes and staging tools and scanning around the network. Well, what ended up happening was this organization got broke into. They loaded up the tools. They scanned around. The environment saw that scan as something unusual, ran an Ansible playbook, reloaded the Kubernetes controller, which bopped the people out. Now, obviously, they're still vulnerable. So the average is like, what happened? He breaks back in. He does it again. The Ansible playbooks notices it and reloads it all. And I think they broke in 3, 4, maybe 5 times before the SRE team was alerted, security was alerted, and they were able to very quickly stop this attack. But what's fascinating about that is it's a really good combination of machine learning, instrumenting your applications, and resilience. They didn't need to have send it to a SOC and investigate, and someone will come out in a few days, right? None of that had to happen. It immediately repaired the environment.
Yeah, that's a great example. When I talk to a layperson, they say, how's it going to put cybersecurity? I put it in layperson's terms. I say, how they're finding cancer, by looking at scans or CT scans that humans can't, and AI does, and they save a life. I say, imagine that, looking at logs, looking at the code that's being written, looking at so many areas where it can identify this is really a risk that you don't see yet, but it's going to grow into one. And I think it just touches everything. And can change everything for, stronger defenses. But that takes us to the dark side. We talked about it. It's a shield, but it's also a sword. It's a weapon. And, enemy states, do so much damage, to businesses around the world. And, cyber criminal gangs are making billions of dollars that, are incredibly sophisticated organizations with very talented people. And just casual hackers are going to be using especially generative AI against our audience. Share some of your insights and thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, your point is so well taken. These are well-funded groups. They're well-organized groups. If you look at how they're structured, how they write code, how they put out code, how they give comp time, how they do these things as a service, it becomes very quickly apparent that we basically have a well-funded, well-organized adversary, as opposed to the glorious old days where might have been 1 or 2 people, but They weren't necessarily highly monetized. They weren't necessarily equipped with an entire team to go after you. So, those things have certainly changed. Now, what terrifies me? Okay, back to phishing. 3 decades. We thought if we got off AOL, it would go away, right? Every single time across those 3 decades, we've made a stance saying we will end phishing. Today it's passwordless. And by the way, I love passwordless. Please, if passwordless is not already on your roadmap, add it to your roadmap. The FIDO Alliance and other vendors are doing a great job with this.
I'll echo that 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so easy.
Take people out of the equation. Number one vulnerability is people. You can remove it from the process. You've done the most important thing for last year, next year, and every year after that. Removing the human vulnerability. Please continue.
But it's being pitched as some people get too excited, like, oh, it'll end phishing. I'm like, oh, my brother in cyber. Let me tell you what's going to happen, right? The minute it's there's going to be other adversaries. So if you look at what's happening with AI, we're going to see a similar arms race. And a lot of our non-machine learning defenses are based on pattern matching, both technical and human. You mentioned the human side. Obviously, we teach people, look for the typos, look for the poorly worded grammar, look for the URL, right? We've taught people that forever because it sort of worked. Well, once you got something like an LLM writing those emails, yeah.
That's all gone. Yeah, all those flags, they're all gone, yeah.
There's Worm GPT is out, and that is the evil twin of Chat GPT. It's another LLM that writes the malware and writes the phishing. So pattern matching on the human side didn't work well before. It's not going to work well going forward. Pattern matching on the machine side. How often we across the years went, oh, give me the IP address of the bad guy, or give me the hash of the file, and I'll make sure that it's not in my environment. Well, that made sense when there was one file coming from one IP address, but not when you can be anywhere. And when they're using LLMs to write mal code very quickly, similar to what our developers are doing, right? For every person who's using a co-pilot to write their code, there's a criminal out there who's using a GPT to write their code. We have the ability to have unlimited malware, which means signal detection based on hashing and everything and pattern matching out the window. Yeah. So we're on this weird precipice where a lot of our foundational controls are going to be rendered mute. And we've got to equip better controls quickly.
Yeah, that's great insight. And you see it already. A couple of things, stand out. Just this last week. Last week there was a story on BBC. They're journalists. They took ChatGPT, now that it has, the application modules. And they asked it to write, they said, write a marketing email that will get people to click on it. Which is essentially what people that make phishing do. The regular person at ChatGPT wouldn't do it, but the unique applications would. And so these journalists create these effective phishing emails using the sign up and pay for them £20 or $20 a month for it. And another thing that stood out in my mind was maybe it was 3 weeks ago, Stephanie Carruthers, who's the chief people hacker with IBM X-Force Red Team. I mean, they're renowned, almost as good as Cisco's. And she set out to do a comparison of what you can do with an LLM, current technology, versus some of the best minds at hacking in creating phishing emails. And that's what they did. They created well crafted emails that you've talked about, that no flags, really deceives a lot of people that know what they're doing. And then they took, a version of an LLM, ChatGPT, I think, took the guardrails off and had it create some phishing emails. And their team still beat the LLM, but not by much. Here's what really stood out to me. She shared that it took them an average of 16 hours to create a really effective phishing email. But that's a limiting factor.
Yeah.
The ChatGPT, 5 minutes. And I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and I was talking to the senior person at IBM. I said, how many people do you think have the skill level to create phishing emails like that? 100,000 on this planet? And they said, oh no, it's in the tens of thousands the most. And so I thought, how many people would have the ability to use an LLM? And you mentioned, there's Fraud GPT, there's like 6 or 7 out there already. Who knows how many? How many people do you think you could use that to write a phishing email? Across no scale. The answer is 1-2 billion people. And that's why I think we already see this huge increase. Somebody reported last week the amount of phishing is up, today versus a year ago, up over 1,000%. Now, when anybody, and you mentioned it, Wolfgang, there's IABs, there's ransomware as a service, it's all becoming specialized, and it's all becoming so easy for people who aren't skilled to launch attacks. I mean, you look at our audience here, so many people that we talk to, they have to protect their employees, they have to protect their network. Our audience has this double burden of protecting themselves and also their customers. And if you're a large financial institution, you've got 500,000, 5 million or 40 million people you interact with. It's not just your employees getting phished, it's all those customers. And by regulation, you have to replace it. So I think that, generative AI, the fact that so many of these tools are going to be available to everyone, small banks, regional banks, people that were, maybe their best defense strategy was, I'm below the radar, I'm not big enough to attack. Now everybody is. And I think 2024 is going to be an incredibly challenging year because of that.
Yeah, and you mentioned below the radar, and again, this is a matter of time. I keep coming back to time, but time pressure is all I feel these days. I joined FS Isaac many years ago, and I'm sure many folks here in our audience are on FS Isaac. And the reason I was convinced to join was a much larger organization than me. Their CISO was like, look, we see the text first because they go after us first. And then they go a little bit down market once we harden. And then they go a little bit down market once they harden. And he's like, and I'm not going to say where you are in that chain, but somewhere between us and the very, very small firms, they're going to hit you. And by that point in time, enough firms have seen these types of attacks and have shared in FS Isaac. If you're part of that, you can get that intel, you can get the insight, and you can be ahead of those attacks. And it worked. It worked very well for us. But again, when things can scale to the point that you're mentioning, that type of, oh, well, I've got 6 months from when the most largest global financial sees it to when it hits me, that time is gone, right? I don't necessarily have that. And that, oh, by the way, we're going to share these common signals, don't necessarily have that. So it really is, it's really putting a lot of time pressure on us. And this is why I keep going back. We've got to deploy those Roombas quick, right? If we're not using some of the tools we have today, we're definitely not going to stand a chance to deploy some of these newer tools coming out.
Something you said earlier brought back a memory of 30 years ago. I think it was 30 years ago. You may remember the "I love you" virus. It was one of the first really effective phishing emails. Everybody wants to be loved. This was a presage of who knew where it would go today. Where your firm's got tremendous research. And that 90% of ransomware attacks, I think it was in your CISO report, which is an incredible, very valuable report. Any of our audience who haven't downloaded and read it, you got to get that Cisco report. But 90% of ransomware attacks start with phishing. So it's how do you stop it? And and they're getting in even with it. And the companies that are hit, they have MFA, but not all MFA is equal, obviously. But and then if they're getting in, how do you stop it in real time? And that's where that we talked about the double-edged sword. And I think, and you mentioned earlier haves and have-nots, and there was a great story in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about how AI in every area will be the haves and the have-nots. And I think we talk about what's on the top of the list for our audience. It's got to be, can you deploy effectively the right AI, integrate into your defense strategy faster, than enemy states and cyber criminals will use it against you. And it's an all-out arms race.
Yeah, we did, and I appreciate the kudos on that CISO report. That's one of my favorite reports to take part in, and because for so many years we've wondered, like, does any of this that we do matter? Like, what outcomes are really driving what results? And finally, we got
Aaron.
Let's put back to prioritization, right? Where of these actions by data are the most impactful. But the other report that we put out this year was AI Readiness Index. So we went and looked at organizations and their readiness for AI, and it's not going to surprise anyone that it was only 15%. Only 15% of organizations were really, truly, poised to deploy these technologies, which means there's a lot of us who have to do a lot of cleaning up and a lot of catching up.
Yeah. It's going to change everything. Speaking of things that bring about major changes, when you go to so many conferences, and I do. One of the things that's top of mind also is the SEC regulations. And earlier in this conversation, you mentioned the role of the CISO, and you made reference to potential criminal prosecution. And certainly these SEC regulations, which take effect this week, in fact, just a couple of days, they're going to be implemented. How that, what's your view of how it's going to impact, how CISO should look at what they need to do, not just public companies, but private too. Share some insights with our audience on that, if you would, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I also tell you, we've got a case study just a few weeks ago of exactly how this is going to play out. However, broadly, let's set the groundwork. There's two main things. Proactively, we as security leaders need to document our risk management strategy, right? Describe our security processes, describe what we're doing against material impacts to the SEC. And that's one of the things that I'm having a lot of conversations with peers and executives that I coach is, right, how do we do that? How do we write it? Please don't write it yourself. please engage your outside counsel, right? One thing that I get asked a lot right now is, hey, well, can you just tell me what materiality means so that I can write in policy? No, I will not. And no, you should not, right? Have the lawyers define that. So we got to be proactive. We've got to present those plans and document those plans, and of course, educate the board and everyone on those plans. On the reactive side, Form 8K now means something, right, to us. And what that ends up being is within 4 days of a material incident, we've got to file a Form 8K, which says, here's what happened, here's what we know, here's what we're doing about it. And when we resolve that issue, again, we have got to, file the form on that. One of the things I want to see, this would be game-changing, John, if we can see this, is I want to see effectively like the NTSB, right? That, there's an airline crash. I will, investigate. Now, I would love to see these AKs begin to be aggregated and shared and let us all know what's working, what's not. That would be huge, but we are not there yet. Right now, we're just like, we've got to let them know we were compromised. So again, time pressure. 4 days is a very short time period when you're under fire.
It is. And people are going to feel that pressure. I've spent a lot of my career, working with public companies, directly managing investor relations, trying to avoid the SEC, but always being remarkably aware of their expectations. When companies, they have huge liability, because when there is a breach, when you look at some of the public companies, they've had significant impact on their share value. And there are law firms that simply watch share prices, and when it drops a fixed percent, they file a class action lawsuit on behalf of the shareholders. So, and then everything comes out, the disclosures, the filings. So when you look at these regulations, I think you look at it at two parts. One, there's that disclosure part of it. If it's material, you have to disclose it, say what you know. Some people say, that helps the hackers. It's really meant to protect investors. And the other part of it is where companies describe in their MD&A and their disclosures, 10K filings, they've described, and to me, here's a big change. In the past, it read like a marketing brochure, which doesn't fly in the investment community because there are lawyers, but they'd say, we implement best practices. Now, lawyers will say, well, what are those best practices? Do you not keep up with, patching? Do you use default passwords that the item ships with? Those are not best practices. So now you'll have lawyers that say, show that to me. We have to write about it in detail. I also think this becomes kind of people say, what's the impact? I say, I think it's gonna be like a SOX moment. I remember SOX, after the Enron, scandals and huge losses, SEC stepped in and said, we have to protect financial markets, we have to protect investors. This is not as dramatic as that, but I think it's similar, where suddenly now, instead of an individual talking about it, you have all this oversight, not just from the SEC, but you talked about it, Wolfgang, the lawyers. Before that goes out, the lawyer's going to read it and say, did you say enough to minimize our exposure to a class action lawsuit. And so that's going to require a lot more investment, a lot more time. So our poor audiences that are out there, they're now going to have to do this in, you said record time, but they have to also have time to have the lawyers review it and say, you can't say this, or you didn't say enough. So it's going to require a bigger investment on people that already have budget constraints. I think it's a net sum good, because those organizations, and there's a lot of them that are already doing a really good job, they won't have to adjust much, just as with SOX. And the people that maybe are laggards will have to. And their organizations who are being too stingy, I'm getting on to our next subject a little bit, but not yet, but they've been too stingy with funding investment, they'll have no choice. And as more companies increase their investment in cybersecurity, all boats rise with the tide. This will help everyone, because financial institutions are already spending a lot, and most of them are already there, but there's a lot that aren't. And when everybody's more secure, we're all more secure. So that's what I think will be the biggest impact of this regulation. And if you're already most people are, if you don't like working with lawyers, too bad. You're going to be doing a lot of that in the coming days.
I think it all also, brings a degree of transparency, right? So just a couple weeks back, there was a title insurance and settlement services firm, right? We're talking real estate, not naming names, because all of us get compromised, all of us get breached. That's not the point. But their business, title insurance and settlement services. So November 21, they file that said, hey, look, we've been compromised, we're dealing with it. Shortly thereafter, the ransomware gang Black Cat, which is behind the same folks who, same platform went after MGM and Caesars, they're having a moment. They post on their internal sites, hey, look, we've got this firm, right? They're on our list. If they don't pay, we're going to release all their data. Around November 25th, that notice disappears. And on November 26th, they post, hey, we're all clear. We've got it. We're good. Which leads people to wonder, like, did they pay the ransom? Did they clear it up? What happened in that time? And so it opens up a degree of transparency that before we wouldn't have that, right? We wouldn't be able to have some good conversations and share some lessons, because who wants to admit when they get hit?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to start seeing this play out and start seeing this work. Now, there's the arguments on the other side. What about ransomware's reporting you to the SEC and et cetera? So, that's another area where it's going to add a degree of complexity. But I do think, to your point, it's only good when we've got visibility, especially visibility to our board and to senior leadership from a security leader perspective, in terms of what we're doing and what resources we need.
Yeah, and that's a. I'm sure you saw the Black Cat who hacked an organization and then reported him to the SEC, which I thought was hilarious. But to your last point about the resources that are needed, I mean, that's profound, Wolfgang. And that leads us to the last topic, and that is, for all the things we've talked about, this last subject, every one of them, it takes money. It takes money, it takes people, which is, again, saying money. And, we talk about, when our audience listening is like, okay, there's been some valuable things here. This is what I need to do. I've got my to-do list. Now, how do I fund it? And that I think will be a challenge. What are your thoughts on that, on how our audience can wrangle more budget, from those that control the purse strings?
The example I just gave ties into resiliency, which we're talking about in the beginning, because everyone who's reliant on that settlement service, right? We're all an ecosystem of companies these days. And suddenly, when we're passing our customers to that settlement service, they're getting errors, they're getting pages not found, they're getting, no one answering the voicemail, right? So we need to look at this from a business impact perspective. I'm the big fan of security delivers a business result, and by delivering a business result, increases the security posture. So I do think it begins with resilience, and it begins with saying, here's how we're protecting institution, here's how we're protecting our investments or our client services or any number of things that drive revenue. Point one. Point two is, those SEC changes are going to spur good conversations, are going to spur good enhancements. Much like socks. Your point on socks is brilliant. I wish I thought of that, John, because man, I made so much hay as a CISO during socks. And if you're in security leadership and you're like, oh well, the SEC is going away, or I don't need to worry about it, you are missing an opportunity to get closer with your board, to strengthen your relationships, and to really shine a spotlight on where you're doing well and where you need help. So leveraging those points, and again, uh, the deployment of technology right now, where we oftentimes like, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the people. Oh, I can't do that because my people aren't good enough. Spend some time and level up your team, and that will only pay dividends in terms of how fast and how far your organization can go.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. The bad news is that, losses, are doubling and they're going up. The silver lining, if you want to call it that, for our audience, is that, the CFO, CEO, board, they're going to look at ROI. And if you
Yeah.
say, look, losses have doubled, this is a loss I'm preventing, that's doubled, so it should support budget. I remember years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a great interview with Jamie Dimon, and they asked him, they said, you spent hundreds of millions of dollars on cybersecurity. Yeah, how much will you spend next year? And he gave a very simple answer. I mean, he's a brilliant man. He simply said, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And that's what's between a financial institution, and like a consumer product. I mean, when Clorox got hit, some things were out of stock for a while. When Hanes brands got hit, maybe you couldn't buy t-shirts. I still wear Hanes. I still use Clorox. When I was doing my laundry, maybe I couldn't use bleach. But if you're a financial institution, that is hard. There's so much trust involved there. So I think for our audience, maybe they've got a little more support on being able to fund that. And the last thing that made me optimistic about our audience being able to get their budget supported was one of the consulting firms put out a report a couple of weeks ago that, in the era of AI, everybody's investing in AI, they said that budgets and investment in cybersecurity were actually up for the prior quarter for cybersecurity more than the investment in AI. So I thought, that's a ray of sunshine, that should give hope to everybody that, with all the things that are going on, that budget will be there. And, for our audience, now is the time to, as you're building budgets for next year, really push for that bigger number, because there's never been a better time to leverage the arguments that you need a bigger budget than right now, with the things that we've been talking about, Wolfgang, the SEC, the AI, all of these things. I think that when we look back at 24, analysts that look at it will say that they're one of the biggest increases in cyber spend, in the last decade. Because as Jamie Dimon said, you got to spend what you have to do it. Yeah. Any last thoughts? It's been fantastic talking with you. It's been very knowledgeable and enriching. Any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, it's been great, John. I go back to what I had said earlier, which is, AI is hot, and to be an AI first company, you have to be a data first company. And when we think about data, what do we do? What does the security function do? It enables access, secure access to data, to resources for our customers, for our workforce, and fundamentally for the people who rely upon us. So I think this does put us in a really good position. It's just going to be a challenging position, but if this wasn't challenging, none of us would be in this field. We would have all given up long, long ago.
It is a lot of fun, and for me, 2024 is about, just priority list. How are people getting in? How are the cyber criminals, enemy states getting in? Knock it off. What's the number one way they get in? Hit that first. And it'll be like whack-a-mole. When they stop them from logging in and getting in with compromised user credentials and beating MFA, they're going to go for 20 other ways. So it's not going away. And we saw that. But it's been a great pleasure. Thanks so much for joining this session. I hope our audience got a lot out of it. I did. And I hope we get a chance to do it together again sometime. Thank you.
Pleasure's been all mine, John. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.